As long as you have this attitude, I know for sure your company won't be alive in 20 years. I was at the World Seed Congress 2 weeks ago, and I told that story, and they were looking to me, are you insane? And you see it now even in Gaza, where food is used as a weapon.
Is consumer local more a Western society thing, or is something that it could be applied to all the parts of the world?
So I think there we are globally agree. No country can be self-sufficient. Sometimes what I see, even when I come, of course, coming from the Netherlands, and when I speak with Dutch politics, even with the former Dutch Prime Minister, he's not close enough to the whole food systems. He's not really aware of it. So, yeah, but it's something for ministers of agriculture. Then you speak about FAO. FAO? What's FAO?
So today, and it's actually our first episode of our second season, but today it's also one that I think has a very nice background and very reputable guest. And we already spoke before, Hans, about certain topics and also about a bit of introduction. But how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, I think that's already a very difficult question, though. No, how do I describe myself? I think I'm dedicated to the international cause, especially around food security. I've worked my whole life now for more than 30 years, or 35 years in the international field, working from the Netherlands to Brussels, to New York, to Rome. And it's, of course, an amazing, I would say, universe, but an amazing journey. But it's not always, it's a very complex journey. You can achieve results, but it's a very difficult journey as well. If you look to the challenges we have, we always speak about climate change, but almost never we speak about food security. And that's one of the downsides, I think, of my international work, where climate change is getting all the attention of the public from all the media, where food security is a much more severe problem, but it's not getting enough attention in the media. So that's great that we have this podcast today.
Yeah, definitely. There's a topic that we will want to mention and to touch like the important factors that go around food security. But before that, in this introduction with yourself, I am curious. Have you ever been always really interested in food and the food industry, or is something that just came in your career?
It came into my career. Of course, I studied Dutch and International Law at Leiden University, the best university, of course, in the Netherlands. And then I started working. I was always triggered by the public cause. At the end of my studies, it was a choice going to work as a lawyer in the private sector or start a public career. And I chose for the public career. And then I started working for the Ministry of Agriculture in 1984, when the milk quota were introduced in the Brussels legislation to control the production of milk in the European Union. And I don't have a family background in agriculture, but I was triggered by two things. I would say the international negotiations, especially the Brussels negotiations, and how to tackle the problem of, on the one hand, getting high quality and enough production, and on the other hand, to overcome too much production. And then we were only dealing with Brussels issues. And then I worked for several years as in the legislation department, then started working at the international department. And I always say, also to my students, because I'm still giving lectures both in Boston, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and Wageningen University. I always say to my students, if you work in the international arena, you'll get either addicted to it and you will never go out, or you don't like it, and I always say, get out as soon as possible. So I was from the first one, and I worked for 15 ministers in the Netherlands, 15 ministers of agriculture. But in my career, I started working in Brussels. Then I started working as a director of international affairs, not only in Brussels arena, but also internationally, working with FAO, working in New York. And then at the end of my career, I was Director General for 9 years, then went to Rome as a Dutch ambassador to the 3 Rome-based agencies. The biggest one is, of course, the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the World Food Programme, which is dealing with the emergency help in countries like Gaza, like Sudan, and also the IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development. And from that, the last 3 years, I'm now working as an independent chairperson of the FAO Council. See it as the president of the executive board of a big or multinational company, where the main decisions are taken. And one problem I think in the UN is you have to get consensus with 194 countries, and it means a lot of negotiations, informal negotiations, to get a consensus on the I would say consensus on the decisions. But I think that's also the strength of the United Nations. Of course, multilateralism and the United Nations are often criticized, certainly nowadays. But imagine a world without the United Nations. Then we wouldn't sit around the table with all countries to discuss the many challenges of our world. It's not only security, but it could be climate change, it could be food security, it could be sustainable forest management. And it's one country, one vote. So whether it's China or the United States, it has the same influence as the smallest island state. And I think that's the strength of the United Nations. But of course, it takes time and a lot of informal consultations. And what you see nowadays, of course, the issues are much more complex with the very insecure security situation now around the world. It's not only Gaza or Ukraine, but we have more than 15, I would say, conflict situations in the world. We need UN more than ever, but the interests and the stakes are much higher, so it's much more difficult to get consensus. Long answer who I am.
Yeah. But Hans, on this, like, so it's a lot of like big challenges. It takes more time, and from your side, I can imagine that whenever you want to solve something and it takes so much time, it lowers you can lower someone's energy. So you need to be very internal motivated towards the things that you're doing. So what is it for you? Like, what keeps you motivating doing the job that you're currently doing?
What keeps me motivating is the results you see. But what also keeps you motivating is that if you do your best, you see that you can always make a difference. Sometimes a small difference, sometimes a bigger difference. In 2007, I chaired for 2 years in the international negotiations on an international instrument for sustainable development. And after 15 years, we reached an agreement with the 194 countries. And that's a major achievement because from there, we started to tackle the deforestation, etc. So it's a small step with big results. And it's, of course, also your internal dedication. I strongly believe that only if we work together, we can get a step ahead. And of course, the UN is 2 steps ahead, 1 step backwards. But still, you can see that we can make step forward. And it's the only way forward. And if you're inspired by that background and your own norms and standards, you can make a difference if you're active.
Yeah, I was thinking that you say that one of the things that keeps you motivated is the results you see, but a lot of times when it comes to sustainability, we have guests that have mentioned that sustainability is a matter of putting the seeds, but probably the tree will be enjoyed by the next generations, no? Isn't that something also that can sometimes, I mean, I guess it requires a lot of patience when it comes to taking measurements and expecting to see the results.
It takes patience, but at the same time, I think we need more boldness. As Bill Clinton said last year in New York during the United Nations General Assembly, with the Agenda 2030, we have set our commitments. We have set our goals with the Sustainable Development Goals, also for food security. We think we know the solutions, at least we think we know the solutions. We have the technology, we have the innovations. And then he said, when I ask that in a room, also in negotiation rooms, then it becomes quiet, because the most difficult part is now to implement it. Because we have made so many commitments. We don't need more commitments. We don't need more conferences about another commitment and another global fund. What we have to do is, how do we implement it? We have to implement it. If you look to for example, to food security, in 1996, 28 years ago, we were at the World Food Summit here in Rome. We're discussing 800 million people in hunger. We are now 28 years later. We are still discussing 800 million people in hunger. We are discussing more than 280 people in acute hunger. We are discussing 3 billion people who don't have access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food. We have 2 billion people have too much food or eat too much food. And then at the same time, we lose every year 1/3 of our produced food. So if you count that, there is no food shortage because what we produce, we can feed the world. But of course, it's not really equally divided. And we know that the population will grow, certainly in Africa. We go to, expectations are 9 to 10 billion in 2050, world population. So that means that we still have to feed more than 2 billion people extra. And that means, I would say, an increase of agricultural production between 40 and 50%. And last but not least, and those, if you think for a moment, take 30 seconds to think about those dizzying figures. That's why everybody should be motivated to work on a food strategy. Would it be globally? Would it be regionally? Would it be at the national level? Because we can change it. For example, in Africa, we lose 70% of the food which is produced before and directly after harvest. We have that's the food losses. We have the technologies for, I would say, the harvesting. We have the technologies for cold chain. We have the technologies for processing. If we work together, and that's, I think, what we do as a UN system, because I'm positive about the UN system, but I'm also very critical because we have to work much more closer with the private sector. We have to build for them the business case to invest at the national level, because we cannot, I would say, we have to sit together at the global level to inspire, to get commitments. But when it comes to the implementation, it has to be done at the national level with the governments, but certainly also with the private sector. We have those companies. There's more than enough funding and investment opportunities to tackle the problem. And that's what we have to do.
Did you, on this, so I think we have to dive into this topic because we already spoke on this before as well. And I'm wondering now, when we see these things and we have to get more we have to take action, and the connection needs to be coming more to the corporates and that part and businesses in that sense. If you talk to that side of the field, what are their struggles? What holds them back to actually take that action?
Yeah, and of course, there's no silver or golden bullet, silver bullet. It's not one size fits all.
No.
But what I'm saying is that we need the private sector. And of course, it has to be done in a social, responsible way. So you have to, I would say, have a setting where you work with the private sector, trying to get their investments done, but also make sure that civil society and environmental organizations like the World WWF are involved in the shaping of those investments. And what I see, and I've seen it in the last 2 years, because we're working on an initiative on food losses in 5 African countries to be started this year. If you work with the private companies, they see that there are investment opportunities in Africa and Southeast Asia. Why Africa? Because FAO reports show that in 20 to 30 years, the food production will happen in Africa. The food will come from Africa because they are the youngest, I would say, region. They have the potential. They are growing in an economic way, but also, I would say, in a technology way. And they become bigger than, for example, European Union. European Union is becoming more and more a fortress. And now we are exporting to, many companies are exporting to Europe, but it will be the way around in about 20, 30 years. So many companies see the opportunity and the need to invest and make a business case in those countries. There are 2 or 3 main hurdles. First, of course, you have to do the analysis to make sure, for example, for food losses, with the World Bank, we are working on an analysis in those countries. In which commodities are the main losses and where in the value chain. Then you have a clear picture where the losses are, where you have to invest in. Then it is easier for the companies to invest in. Then, of course, you have to have a setting, we call it a deal room, where it's not the companies on their own, but together with the governments as well as international organizations, let them build a business case for their investment plans. We have done it with, for example, DSM in Rwanda. We have done it last year with dairy company Fries Campina in Nigeria. But one of the hurdles is then, of course, the first risk financing. And what it means is a technical term. That is, of course, a risk. And how do you overcome? You can help those companies to overcome the first risk. Sometimes the first risk is not an insurance, but is how to organize the farmers in a certain region. And there, I would say, farmers' organizations could help, and you need extra help. The whole idea is, of course, is not to subsidize or fund companies, because it is a business case for them to start their business or invest in business cases in those countries. And it's working out. And that's, I think, for me, seeing that happening gives me the drive to do more.
Can you maybe dive into the losses that you have found so far? So from the first step that you had to take, right, to do the risk, like the analysis, where are mostly like the losses found in Africa?
Yeah, it goes from country to country. For example, in Nigeria, it was losses in tomato, rice production, maize production, and it goes from 30 to 50%. It was also in dairy, where the production per cow was very low with diseases, etc. And also the cold storage of the milk was not enough. So that's clear where the problems are in the value chain. Then, of course, you work. It's not only that you bring in a multinational into a country. That's not the right way to do it. It's working with I would say, the local producers with investments from indeed bigger companies, and see how the investment can take place, where it's needed, how to make a business case. In the business case, for example, for Friesland Campina, it's not that they invest and then take out the money. The profits will be owned by the farmers in Nigeria. They will own the milk factory and the cold storage. So you reinvest in an economic system which needs to be sustainable. So it's also about training of farmers. It's also about the sustainable production, so that you take the sustainability, that you look to the environmental sides, that you look also to social security, I would say, not only training of farmers, but also looking at how to educate the children, how to take care of the healthcare systems. And then you build a sustainable ecosystem in an area. And that's where we are heading. And that's exactly the idea behind, I would say, Agenda 2030. But it takes time. And of course, the analysis is done with universities, because everything has to be science and fact-based. So that's why the World Bank is involved with some of the universities and the countries itself, because they have the data. They gather the data together also with international institutes. And based on that, they make a country profile. And that will give the basis for further action.
Yeah, I am trying to process, because in the end, everything tends to make sense. But then when I think, okay, and if everything makes sense and the puzzle fits all together, what are the reasons why the rest of the countries, or why is so necessary a constant negotiation and a constant convincing of people? What are the reasons that hold back this progression to this kind of system?
The problem is, of course, it's easier said than done. When you help me say it, they say, why were we not doing that 20 years ago?
Exactly.
But the problem is, of course, is that we have a very complex international food systems. It's not one food system, but food systems. They are very independent, and at a certain time very dependent from each other. For example, many farmers in Europe are depending on the soya production in Brazil and Argentina. And you have also, that's one thing. More and more, of course, certainly when we have had COVID, you see that more trade distortions arose. Governments, seeing that they had a food shortage, were restricting imports from the country to other countries or to Europe, which means less, I would say, less investments in the country and less investments in the food systems. Another complex issue, of course, what you see is that food is more and more used in a geopolitical way globally. Yeah. And you see now even in Gaza, where food is used as a weapon. And then, of course, you get further away from, I would say, the solution which I described Thirdly, of course, we see that we have the climate change. And when a country is, of course, hit by climate change or hit by flooding, you're thrown back for a couple of years. For example, in Nigeria, we had Olam, the company Olam, wanted to invest big in tomato and rice production. But due to severe floodings, they had to stop their investments for at least 3 to 4 years. So you were thrown back 3 to 4 years. And that makes it also quite difficult in each way. Thirdly, of course, we speak about food security, but we have also the food safety standards, which are negotiated here in Rome and in Geneva, the Codex Alimentarius it's called. For the developed countries, certainly in the West, it's easy to produce in a safe way and meet those standards. But it's much more difficult for developing countries because often they don't have the technologies, they don't have the laboratories or the labs to check the products. And then it becomes, I think, very difficult for those farmers or fishermen to export their products to Europe. So that inequality has to be taken care of. And that's why we need those negotiations, not only about norms and standards, but also how can we support those countries to get the labs, to get the technologies and inspection systems to inspect their products so that they are safe and can meet the standards.
I have then a question that is related to one matter that you mentioned, that we have a system that is really dependent and independent at the same time, and that's in some sort of interdependency, I guess, structure. And one of the things that I see more now, when it comes to, for example, looking for a more sustainable food system, is consume more local. And in that sense, consume more local for me sounds to become more independent if possible, and therefore trying to get less commodities from certain parts of the world. But how does consume more local fight against this food security? Is consume more local more a Western society thing, or is something that it could be applied to all the parts of the world?
I think people in the West, and certainly Europe, I would say, are not aware anymore how rich they are in their food choices.
Yeah.
They can buy everything more or less what they want. Not only products which are produced regionally or locally, but also produced in other worlds. For example, many people in the Netherlands like Thai food or Indonesian food, so they can buy everything there. And with our inspection systems, they know it's safe. And of course, there is a tendency, and I think it's a good approach that you see there, where, for example, in the meat production, you can produce much more regionally instead of transporting from far away.
Yeah.
But if you are living, for example, in Kenya, it's a completely different world, because you cannot say, first, it's very difficult to meet the standards. And so often what you see is, of course, that they will sell their products locally without checking their products, which means more diseases in those communities. Secondly, they produce, but they don't have the variety of production to have the diets they want. What you see now in many developing countries, they're getting out of a one-sided diet, for example, only based on rice, and want to have a much more rich diet. And that means containing more products. But now some of the Western countries say, yeah, but they should not eat, we should not have more meat production worldwide, so they shouldn't eat meat. Are we really saying that? So now finally they can have a more nutritious diet, and they say, no, but it's not for you. And that's one of the problems, of course. And of course, it's also the products, the production side. We know that we have to produce much more sustainable. Many of the production systems in Europe have the possibility of accessing innovations, the newest technologies, etc. For the farmers in Africa, it's very difficult to access innovations which are affordable, reachable, and implementable And even if they have some of those, they still have to be trained in those innovation or technologies. So also there you see a huge inequality which we have to bridge. And of course we're working on that. And then when I speak about investments of companies, they have to contribute to that bridging as well. But at the end, the benefits will be there for them, for everybody involved. But it is an uphill battle.
Indeed.
So don't come to me say we have to eat. I see those stories in the Netherlands as well. Let's eat less or no more meat.
In the end, of course, that is what I mean. Like, and then we get like this story of eat more local or eat less meat or something, and we tend to believe that it is like a global trend. But then when you realize and when you accept and get awareness of your privilege and your and why these or for who these claims are done, then so because it's what I was guessing that how are you gonna tell to, for example, African people to eat more local when they cannot maybe meet the standards, or what this need to be done also in order for African people to eat more local? That needs to be more investment from I don't know who countries, private companies.
No country worldwide and all the universe. I think there we are globally agree. No country can be self-sufficient. No country can be self-sufficient when it comes to nutritious food, healthy and nutritious diets. So you always depend to a certain extent on imports from other countries. Okay. And we are very much promoting that also developing countries should have the possibility and the right to healthy diets. And that means that some of those products have to be imported in those countries. And what we have to do is if we see those imports, we have to see how those imports can be of high quality, high sustainability, but still be affordable. And that's working with and through the markets, but making sure that there are not unlawful restrictions to the trade. Because some of the restrictions are set even by the European Union. And of course, the European Union has, and the farmers have a big advantage by the subsidy system in Europe for the farmers. And that gives inequality to the farmers in, for example, Africa and Southeast Asia, because they are paid for sustainable production. But which farmer in Tanzania or which farmer in Kenya is getting subsidies for their production, sustainable production? So there you see another inequality which we have to tackle. And so that means that the EU has to focus much more also on the global food systems and not only to their food system in the European Union.
That is a very interesting point that you made there. And you already did this one, by the way, when we had the conversation. I had already a bit of an idea about this. Talking about what you said before is like that there's no country that can be self-sufficient. Like that for me is, I cannot imagine that. So why cannot it be true? Because I believe like in the Netherlands, we like just to look at some numbers, we are export country number 2. We have enough food. We can be self-sufficient. We can grow vegetables. We can grow fruits. We can also do the meat part. So there's enough variety. So why is it not?
No, but I think you have to look then to the whole food system, because this is a food system what you can buy in a shop, what you can produce in your own country. But for example, we cannot have enough, I would say, meat production. Even if we eat less meat, we are depending on the soya production in Argentina and in Brazil. Otherwise, our dairy sector could not exist and could not have enough milk in the supermarkets. And so there you see the dependencies, and there you see more dependencies when it comes to, I would say, nutritious food. So that's why I say no country can produce enough food for their people in a nutritious or in a healthy diet way. So, and it could be also when it comes to, well, it would now in the Netherlands wouldn't be tomatoes, but other vegetables cannot be grown in the Netherlands. For example, pineapples is I think not easy to be self-sufficient. And then of course you can say don't eat pineapples anymore. But if you then stripe out many of those products. Whereas then your healthy diet.
Yeah, I agree with you that of course that you need to put it. But yeah, I was also shocked by this affirmation, if I am honest, by this statement, because when it comes to my head is like countries with very diverse climates, like Italy, Spain, the US. The US is like a huge country. I don't know if they would ever be able to feed all the people in their trains. But then it seems to me, because then we have to see like self-sufficiency and in a nutritious way. I believe that there's a lot that you can crop from the current diet that we have, that we just consume for a matter of availability. But when it comes to self-sufficiency, it would be, I mean, I don't know what is the data in that sense, but I am really shocked by the statement that no country.
No, but you look only to I think you look only to the consumer side, but you have to look also to the input side.
I get it.
I mentioned, for example, the soya, but it comes also to fertilizers. It comes down to pesticides, herbicides, etc. All those things are part of your production and your food systems. And even, for example, the European Union has, I think, since 1945 in its policy that they try to be 70% self-sufficient. But they clearly stated that even the European Union, with now 27 member states, cannot be self-sufficient at full.
Yeah, okay.
And I get it. Also, and you also, to a certain extent, it's not only about the food production, it's also about, because there are three pillars. Sustainability, it's the economic way, it's the environmental way, and the social way. You need, of course, also an economic development. And it means also trade has been, since thousands, even now living in Rome, thousands of years, was trade, especially in food. And the most important thing is that you work on a fair trade system where inequalities like subsidies are thrown out. And then you come to a fairer system. And thirdly, look to developing countries. I mentioned, I can also go to South Africa or wherever. The variety of products which are available for the consumers are, I think, more than 80% less than what's available to the consumers in Europe or the United States. And if I look to the World Health Organization, for example, look to what they say what a healthy diet is. And also they stated no country can produce 100% healthy diet for the population. And that doesn't mean that we have to work on it, because I agree with your statement that we have to look to much more regional production systems, so that we don't have to transport food all over the world. So to reduce the footprint all over the world. So certainly we have to make a huge effort on it. But at the same time, it means also that we have to get rid of several trade barriers. Would it be between regions? Would it be within regions?
Yeah. Those trade barriers are, like you mentioned, the two, like subsidies and the standardizations around food safety, right? But
you saw it with COVID, when, of course, COVID hit the world. It hit hardest, of course, the African countries. And there, because they had a low production and were still exporting some of their products, many measures were taken by governments to ban exports from those products to other regions to protect their production. But of course, it also means, on the other hand, that they got less, I would say, dollars for investments in their production systems, to upscale their production systems in a sustainable way. So that was indeed, and FAO has written reports about it, and look to the state of food and agriculture, food insecurity, which will come out next month, or this month even. It's already the 1st of July. There you see that due to COVID, there was an enormous increase in restrictions in trade. Of course, they are now diminished one by one. We are trying to diminish them and help countries to diminish them. But you see the consequences directly at the economic scale with some of the farmers. had overproduction in those countries because they could not sell their products anymore for export. So that is hindering the sustainability and sustainable production in those countries. And of course, for that, of course, you need organizations like the FAO to sit around the table to make sure that we see how we can tackle those restrictions, how we support sustainable production, and how we can help farmers to get access to the best technologies in an affordable way. And that are issues, and of course, are different issues. That's why it's so complex. It's not only about meat, or it's not only about tomatoes. It's also about the food safety. It's also about agro-logistics. It's about investments, etc. So that makes it so complex. And at the same time, the solutions are to be grabbed.
I am really curious now that you mentioned, because it's one of the things that we wanted to discuss in here. That sometimes it's surprising that people has heard about FAO in our sector. A lot of people does not know what FAO actually does. And I think that is a good moment to tackle one question that might seem really basic, but at the same time is really important. And is, what is the role of FAO, and how does FAO work to solve problems?
Yeah, the role of FAO, it was the first UN organization after the Second World War, which was founded in 1945 and really founded in 1948. It's trying to work with countries to establish, I would say, sustainable food production, but also what we are doing. Of course, we are famous in gathering data about the production itself, data about diseases, data about water management, data about import and export systems, data about prices, so that you have a global picture what's happening. For example, with the geodata and systems we have now, and with the satellites, when we come to deforestation, we don't need all the facts and data anymore from some of the countries, because we can measure them via the satellites. That's why we had 2 years ago quite a discussion with Brazil, where the figures they gave about the reduction of deforestation didn't go well with the figures we got from the satellites. Yeah. But there we are very famous. Secondly, perhaps not much known, but the standards for safe food, so that we don't have too much herbicides or pesticides in our products, etc., are developed here in Rome together with the World Health Organization. We are discussing, for example, genetic resources, to have not only access to genetic resources for companies, but also benefit sharing for the farmers, especially in Africa, from the access which companies get. We are discussing sustainable fishery policies, how to overcome overproduction, how to monitor legal fishing and illegal fishing, how to try to help countries to install, that's why we have code of conduct for sustainable fisheries, how to implement those policies and also regulations in our countries. We have, in about 3 weeks, we have the Committee on Forestry, where we discuss the sustainable forest management, how to overcome deforestation, how to sustainably manage our products, our forest, but also the product coming out of the forest. And that are the policies which we are discussing. And of course, FAO is very much involved also in programs in developing countries, like the Sahel region, when it comes to improving food productions. We are together with the World Food Programme also working on, I would say, humanitarian support in the conflict areas. So it's a big range of activities which are being done by FAO. And we have one, I would say, which you clearly pointed. We are not good enough in telling the story, because we need to do much more on communication, what FAO is doing, because it's one of the most unknown UN organizations. When you go to UNEP, the environmental program, everybody knows UNEP. UNICEF, everybody knows UNICEF.
World Health Organization.
World Health, everybody knows. But when you speak about FAO, what's FAO? What's doing?
I always tell people that, like I told people last weekend that I will interview, you are from the FAO, and then I said like they were saying, well, what is then the FAO? I say, well, do you know the World Health Organization? That's for the health side. This is for the food and agri side. and that's how I then explain it in that sense. But
Yeah, and it is
what
a
do I
pity.
say?
But it's a pity
Yeah,
that
yeah.
people don't know. But it's the same. I think it's a little problem for the whole. When we speak about food systems, nobody thinks about food systems. Everybody speaks, of course, when you speak about climate change, everybody knows. But food systems, because people in the West, they are so used to it, so they don't think about their food systems. I went to the school of my son's now 23, but when he was 6, I went to his school, elementary school, and there the children thought that milk is coming from a factory. Because of course we are living in a city, but they didn't know that the milk is coming from a cow. So
That's terrible.
yeah, that's terrible. Yes, so but that's
when I was a kid, milk cow was like the
yeah. For me, and I think we take a lot of things for granted, and we have to create much more awareness. And I think that's why also tackling food waste, because we can do a lot also on the waste side. Because I very much agree that we can eat much more and eat less meat. We throw away way too much food products. If the people's a little bit more aware, it would be a huge contribution towards sustainability. And that's why I think we need that awareness raising, and we need that, I would say, that narrative much more known. But yeah, what can you do?
Yeah.
Well, this thing you're doing is already something that I believe that it helps.
Yeah, with those podcasts. No, but what I was saying is
to bring and try to bring the story, and because then you also help to others to collaborate in sending the message. It doesn't have to come always only from FAO, although of course it's the main responsibility. But then, if you make people excited about it, they will also join into explaining.
And I think what we have not, let me say it in the diplomatic way.
Yeah, okay.
We don't have always the good narrative, because what I now see too many times is that the farmers are accused for unsustainability. But let's not forget that our food systems start with the farmers. And I've met many farmers in the Netherlands, but also many in developing countries. No farmer wants to produce unsustainable. And of course, every farmer wants to grow, but they say, give me the means to do so. And don't blame the farmers for everything what's going wrong, because it's the traders, the consumers, the politicians, where sometimes the problem is lying, and they have to be part of the problem. And you can say, of course, agriculture is 20%, what's said by the UNEP, 22% of the emissions worldwide for CO2. That means that we still have 78% in other sectors, but at the same time, agriculture is all part of the solution. Because if, for example, if we can help farmers to produce in a much more sustainable way, for example, in Argentina or in Brazil, have more sustainable meat production, it will reduce the emissions, it will reduce deforestation, it will increase the possibility for healthy diets worldwide. And that's why what FAO is doing to help countries, we help to develop those global strategies to be implemented at national level, and to support the countries in implementing it. And that's, I think, a course which we need to do. But I always say, without funding, nothing will go. And I think that's why I always say, when we speak, our prime ministers go every year to New York for UNGA, it's often shown. They always speak about climate change. But I say food security has to be brought at least the same level as climate change, because there's no fighting of climate change without food security, and there's no food security without fighting climate change. But they go hand in hand, and they should be discussed. But for sometimes what I see, even when I come, of course, coming from the Netherlands, and when I speak with the Dutch politics, even with the former Dutch Prime Minister, he's not close enough to the whole food systems. He's not really aware of it. So, yeah, but it's something for ministers of agriculture. Then I say, but why is climate change an issue for you? Yeah, but that's different. And then that's the wrong discussion, because then I explained to him and said, yes, Now I understand. And then he said, yeah, of course we have to address it much more. Also at the level of the heads of states.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think they go, what you say, you have to discuss them both. If you talk about one, you talk mainly actually also about the other in the end. Talking about actually the farmers, and a problem around farmers, and in the Netherlands that is for sure the case, is that the next generation doesn't really want to go into this field. And I don't know the worldwide view on this, but I don't know if it's happening around the world all. But in the end, as you also mentioned, food starts at the farmer. So it's a big problem, and it's not really clear also to the consumers that this is also a trend, right? That is changing and can there can happen a lot of problems in the end to this. So how do we tackle this? How do you think we can tackle this?
Yeah, I said there's always solutions. I think for everything there is a solution. It's always my policy or my thinking. But of course, the issue differs from, I would say, region to region. For example, in Africa, many countries, the perception of agriculture is a small farm with 1 or 2 cows, with some land for production of crops, etc. And that's farming. So that is not seen by the youth as very attractive. If they see then the system where they are growing to, for example, in the Netherlands, where you have high-tech food production, the greenhouse or the glass houses, combined with energy production, where you have crops produced in containers with high technology, then it becomes different. Because I went to 2 companies where students and had doctorates in medicine and something else, I think from technology, etc., started working in those companies. And then it becomes a different picture. And that's why we need to address much more the future of for the next generation in agriculture. Because when it becomes high tech, or when it goes to precision agriculture with the modern technologies, you get the youth interested. Secondly, what we have to do, and I'm involved in an initiative which we now try to roll out to open some African countries, to give the possibility for the youth to set up their own companies, startups. You see many of them, as you have seen in Europe. Some of them became billionaires, others became very well-known companies. But give also the youth, with their new ideas, the possibility to start their own business, and not only in farming itself, but also in the value chain, in the agribusiness, in the all the parts of the chain. And there's what we see. We had a pilot last year. There's a huge interest in several countries for the youth to be part of it. But it makes also clear that they have to get a place around the table. Because only if you involve them in the policy making and the policy setting and the implementation of policy, the youth will come on board. The third element is, of course, migration. What we have seen, of course, many young people leave their countries, and often, and then I become really, really angry, is they say, yeah, they are economic tourists. They want to go to Europe to get a better life. I've spoken in refugee camps in Ethiopia, and we had the possibility to speak with 2 youth groups. And they were almost cursing us, where they say, do you really think? And I spoke with 2 children, who was 2 students, 16 and 18. Do you really think that I want to leave my family? Do you really think that I want to leave my country? Do you really think that I perhaps want to leave my future? Because we know that if from the 10 who will go from this village, only 2 will arrive, hopefully, live in Europe. But is that we don't have a choice. Because if we don't do, we anyhow die here. We don't have any economic future here. We don't have land to grow. We don't have any possibilities. So the family says we have 6 children. 2 will go to, perhaps 1 will help us then to find another future. So that's a problem which we also have to tackle. And that is, of course, a huge problem, a big problem, but it can be tackled. But that are elements which you have to take into account when you want to have the next generation involved. But I've worked now with several youth groups, and I get really inspired by them if I sit with them around the table. And of course, they have different solutions. But we have to learn, as the generation of the past, to give them the opportunity and the possibility to develop and to do better than what we have done.
I was just thinking that I'm getting even a little emotional about, of course, this story about the refugees, because right now you see overall in social media, unfortunately, I see it more often, the rise of certain narratives that seem to be deal with immigration as invasion, and when you when you don't know the other side of what is happening, or you don't reckon like how lucky you are to live in certain conditions, like it's incredible that you are even accusing anybody to come in here. Just well, my country is poor, so I just go to another country. Well, I am an immigrant myself, and I know how hard it is to be constantly thinking about the place where you were born, your family, your friends, and sometimes it's really shocking to see how people tend to see like this look for a life that I think is the most primal survival instinct that we have, as some sort of wanting to take what is ours.
Yeah, but that's the most tragic story which is at this moment worldwide still be told. Because those who have seen it and spoke with those people who wouldn't dare to say it, but now many politicians, certainly those in the who are much more nationalists or from the right, will blame them for the problems they have in the Western countries, and it's a real tragedy. It's an outcry, a moral outcry.
I mean, actually, because of what you were saying, it seems like the politicians are, like really, they lack awareness. You were telling also the story of the former Prime Dutch Minister that seems to have lack awareness in another topic, in the food system, of course. And we had recently a talk with an investor. And one of the questions that we asked him is like, and one of the facts that he showed in one of his reports was that startups were not happy with the amount of knowledge that investors had. Is it possible that this is also a problem in the political side? And it's actually a big problem because everybody that seems to be taking decisions or where the money goes, what policies are applied, seem not to be like quite aware of what's happening.
Yeah. Yes and no. Yes, no, it is, because I think the bigger investors now see that the food area is an area where they want and need to invest.
Yeah,
because it's a growing, I would say, industry, and a broad industry where money is to be gained. But with all those, I would say, people they hired, 90% of them don't have a clue what food systems embrace, what agriculture is. If you speak about AMR, antimicrobial resistance, they think, if you say AMR, they think it's a car, but not something which is related to agriculture. I think that's a problem. But at the same time, I think also what I see also from Dutch companies, also seed companies, and the Netherlands companies are leading the seeds worldwide. They don't do enough in sharing of knowledge, sharing of technologies, and trying to interest the youth. Because sometimes their first priority is to gain more, to get even more money. But now some of the companies say, and that's of course a very short-sighted vision, because if you look to the trends, if the production indeed will come in 20 or 30 years from Africa, how are we based in African countries with our seeds? But otherwise your company goes out of the market, because the seeds will be grown there. The seeds need to be sold there. And it means that you have to invest not only in selling seeds, but you have to invest in the systems over there. You have to invest in the farmers. You have to invest in the value chain in those companies. And only if you do that, then it becomes interesting. Because as I said before, Africa is the youngest region. Then it will be interested. They will become interested to invest in the youth there. And then I know now 2 seed companies who are part of the initiative say, we will fund half of the startups which go to be above a certain level of quality, etc. Because they are very much interested. So that's what you need. But I say it has to start also by the companies, but the companies have to be shaken up. They have a responsibility to look beyond only profits. They need to have a social responsibility to invest in systems also for the next generation.
On this, right? So we talk about systems that are already established, that there they have to invest in. But nowadays, and that's also where investors are looking more towards too, is that there become new innovations that create new change, new value change, new systems. I'm talking about precision fermentation, lab-grown meat, all kind of new innovations that are creating something that was not established before, nobody there was not a farmer, so they have to go from the ground till the up. They create a whole system, which is mainly happening in the Western world, of course. How do you look at this? Is this like something if you globally see it, like with the problems and about food security, let's point that problem out. Is this then innovation that is going to help us towards these things? Because
yeah, it's difficult to give an overall, I would say, answer or a review on it. I think many innovations in the past have shown to make it possible to have a more sustainable production. For example, precision agriculture has shown that it will help sustainability. Reduce the use of herbicides or fertilizers, which is possible. When it comes to completely new products, and then you speak about, of course, I would say the GMOs, genetic modified organisms, and it's not a car, but GMOs, it's important to inform the public. Because what you see that the public, and it's not only in the West, but also in Africa, we had the Monsanto story, where Monsanto said, don't bother, we know that's safe, we give the seeds free to the farmers, then can increase their production, etc. They forgot to tell the farmers that at a certain moment, they didn't get the seeds for free anymore, and that first 10%, then 20%, 30% of their profits. They didn't tell the farmers that you were establishing monocultures, which certainly had very negative consequences for biodiversity. They said that it was safe, but not all products were fully tested on the environmental consequences and the health consequences. So that made the case that people are now very reluctant to eat GMO-produced food. And at the same time, and that's the dichotomy, is that every day people use medicines which are produced via biotechnology, and they don't have a problem with it. But when it comes to food, I think that's what we have to overcome now. And it's one way or another, we have to inform the public much better. And at the same time, artificial meat or artificial vegetables, I don't know whether that would be the story or the future, the real story for a better world. Because many people say, if you say we have to go back to regional production, we have to go back much more to nature-produced products. Artificial meat is not a nature-produced meat. And that cannot, whatever we do now, at this moment, it's not possible to produce it in a way that it really can help him, I would say, to help overcome the problems. But I never say deny the innovations. But you see a new development as well is, for example, in Africa now they are developing a strategy, it's called Strategy for the African Orphan Crops, which are crops which were produced locally, which were very healthy, productive, etc., but were one way or another not produced anymore. Now they're going to re-establish or reproduce those crops, which are very nutritious, which if you market it the right way, can be a very good crop to increase production and your exports. So, and that's also a way where you can, in a more natural way, see how you can contribute to much more food security. And I think those developments are very important. So I think it's always to use the I would say the new technology innovations approach it in a positive way, but make sure that it's science and backed and science and fact based. Make sure that the safety is guaranteed. It's not only this; it's the safety in an environmental way. Also, it's the safety in the health way, and you have to also look to the public perception, because trying to enforce products which are not liked by the public, come on, it's the wrong way of producing. And we have seen it with the Monsanto case. There are other cases as well, but that's why it's so important to get much better information to the public, and not only on a barcode. Because if I go to a supermarket, I don't have the time to go with my iPhone to every barcode to see, etc., where it's produced. But for example, when I go in Germany to a supermarket, they don't sell packed meat anymore in those supermarkets. They sell fresh meat, and I asked the person behind the counter, they know where the meat is coming from. They know where it's produced, how it's produced. And if I ask, they can give me the address of the farm, and you can look at the internet. But what I see is that the meat is better, fresher, and more sustainable produced, and even cheaper. And that's amazing. But that's why it's then more regional produced. So you don't have that many, I would say, steps in the chain before it goes to the consumer. And I think that's the way how you can change partly a food system to make it much more sustainable.
I believe there is something.
And of course, it's not a solution for everything again.
No. It's never one size fits all.
Positive developments which we have to look at, and we have to, I would say, advertise that.
I believe that there is something you mentioned that is really interesting. That is the fact that, we say we want to have more local consumption, but at the same time we're promoting the elaboration of new products via artificial, like cell culture or plant-based, and this is funny because I think it's quite related to what you were mentioning at the beginning. That is that there is a lack of boldness. I think this comes from everybody's putting ideas, putting solutions that the food system can take, but there is no quite of a guideline of where do we want to go. So we want to consume more local, and at the same time, we want to do regenerative agriculture, but also we want to go to the side that is producing more artificial. And I think that is kind of a struggle that even people in the food industry sometimes is having. Like, I don't know in what direction I have to move.
But that's why I think that I earlier said it. That's why a food strategy, not only a food production strategy, but a food strategy encompassing those elements is so crucial. And the food strategy consists not only about governments, but certainly also involving the farmers, as well as the companies in setting up a strategy. And certainly it has to be nationally based, regionally based, and then from a global level can support it. But what I see, and that is frustrating, is sometimes it's easier to negotiate another resolution where we make another commitment and we promise another extra funding to developing countries than to really start have a deep dive in those countries and how to support the countries to develop those investment cases in their own country, because that's where we have to go to.
We're excited to announce that we are official media partners with Future of Protein Production event in Amsterdam between October 23rd and 24th. Don't miss out. Use the special discount code that we leave in our description to join us in this groundbreaking event.
I'm happy that you did this talk as well, right? Like, we have people within the industry listening to this mainly. And as Anders also said, like just before, it's like a lot of people are they don't know where it's going to head to and where they have to head to. So,
but I'm very critical to the companies as well, because I give them, I think, a crucial place. But they have to be much more working together in making it happen, because now they see each other always as a competitor. But only if they find each other, for example, the seed sector, to have some kind of, for example, around the benefit sharing, to have a commitment as seed companies in a certain country to share, give a certain amount for the benefits you get as companies, then you make a step forward, because also they have together, but only together can play a crucial role, not company by company, because then you maintain the same competition, trying to get more profits than the other one. So don't inform them, don't work together, but only if the same what we're doing at, I would say, within FAO with 193 countries or 94 countries, you should do it with the seed companies. But I was at the World Seed Congress 2 weeks ago, and I told that story, and they were looking to me, "Are you insane?" I said, "Why?" "Yeah, but we cannot just commit now." We were sitting around with 20 companies around the table. "We cannot commit to do that together." I said, "Why not?" "Yeah, but he's my competitor. Perhaps he will gain more from it than I will gain." So, yeah, as long as you have this attitude, I know for sure your company won't be alive in 20 years. So that's for them also, I would say, responsibility to go beyond what they are doing now. And you see, for example, we have the International Dairy Council, which is going beyond the individual companies. We have the International Cold Chain Council, where the cold chain companies are really working together and are really to contribute in investment schemes, even if they, as a company itself, will benefit less from it than perhaps a competitor. And that's the attitude and the progress we need.
Like we talk about real system change that mentions a lot within the industry, but these are real system changes.
That are system changes, yes.
Thanks for mentioning. I mean, this is something that has to go out as well, and also bringing awareness to this. Honestly, we can talk. I think another hour, and we come through ending. I just want to give you this opportunity we always give our guests, because we asked you several questions, and now it's the opportunity for the guest to ask us a question. So,
I don't have a question, but I have a personal plea.
Okay.
Also for you, because it's always easy to go to the global system, and what do we need? What do we need to change globally? But we don't have a global governance. We have only the United Nations, 194 countries, but it's not a global governance. What we have to zoom in much more is what we have done also in this talk, is to see where the solutions can be found. Because you cannot drive a solution from New York to Nairobi or Kenya. You cannot drive from Brussels solutions to the countries and implement those in the countries. We have to get to the country level to get things started there. And that's one thing what my plea is, because it's so easy to go again to the global level. And then we send our heads of states or ministers to New York or to Rome. They have a nice statement, they have a nice declaration, everybody's happy, we are going to change the world. It didn't happen for the last 27 years. In this way, we won't do it for the next 30 years. But at the same time, I think we should get a much more honest narrative around our food system, because it's not really known. And last but not least, I make a strong plea to be proud of the farmers we have. Because only with them we can change the system. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I have nothing to say, Hans. It's a great ending.
Yeah, I mean, we have a last question though. If you,
there's only one.
Yeah, if you, yeah, it is the toughest question, and you will say seriously, because this been really quite tough in some moment. Yes, Hans, this is the toughest question, because we always like to ask to our guests, what is your favorite food or dish?
My favorite dish is pad thai.
Really cool. Yeah, really, really nice. I love it as well. Yeah.
And my wife can make the best pad thai.
Seriously.
Is this an indirect invite?
Before I will invite you to my home for a pad thai.
Nice. I will say thank you for this conversation, and it's great that you do the word right. That you said that we also need to spread it, and I see that. Like I'm working as well for StarLife, and we create this ecosystem, right, where we try to get all these players together, even if they are competitors, but just get them on board and see like how startups can help them with it. And I see that we should do that over the whole system and over the whole world, and that's good. Like tackling the problems around food security. Don't forget that one. It's not only about sustainability, right? And yeah, I think it's good. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Great to be with you.